Hello everyone, welcome to another of my album reviews. To introduce myself, my name is Nick Stephenson. I'm a musician and lover of music, of course, which is why I'm here. And the artist that I'd like to talk about today, and one album of his in particular, is a guy called Tom Waits. Now, some of you I'm sure have heard of Tom Waits, but if you haven't, here's a little bit of background about him. So he's an American singer-songwriter, my personal favourite American singer-songwriter, by the way. Who's been going since the early 70s, and he's distinctly known for his voice. He's got this very, very gravelly, guttural way of singing and delivering his words and his poetry and his wonderful sort of music in lots of different styles. Now, the first part of Tom Waits' career was predominantly produced by a guy called Bones Howe, and it featured a lot of sort of jazzy arrangements. Some of which had orchestration added to them, and lots of lyrics about sort of bars and beatniks and bohos, and really the stuff of the American beat poets. So people like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, who would write about the sort of boho lifestyle, if you like, sort of traveling around the country and not really settling and drinking and sort of sleeping under cars and stuff like that. So the album I'd like to talk about today was the record that he released at the very, very beginning of the 1980s. It's called Heartattack and Vine, and I've got a copy of it right here. So this was the last record he produced with his original producer Bones Howe, who I believe he made about six or seven albums with throughout the 70s. And this record really feels like sort of the end of the line for that type of music that he was making. He tried to escape this sound, apparently, this kind of jazzy sound. He reflected that at the time that he'd been hearing everything with a tenor saxophone. So he was very much sort of bored, I suppose, of the approach that he was taking with the sort of music that he was doing, because he'd been doing it for so long. And he really needed a change. Now, this album started with Tom Waits basically moving away from where he'd lived for many, many years, Hollywood and Vine, and moved over to New York to sort of make a fresh start. Now, on New Year's Eve of 1979/1980, he met the woman who was to become his lifelong partner, Kathleen Brennan, at a party. And so more on her later on. But this was a very, very significant meeting because obviously when he met her again, they fell in love very, very quickly and actually were engaged within a week. She was really significant because she basically turned Tom Waits' life and musical direction around entirely. So he kind of attempted some recording sessions and stuff in New York City, but it didn't really work out. And within 6 months, he was apparently back where he'd started. He was back in, the West Coast, essentially. And, the music sort of reflects that because it sounds like his older sound, but it sort of has a slightly world-weary kind of aggression to it, a rawness where it sounds like he's just trying to strip everything away and just try and get back to the sort of rootsy, guttural stuff. Now, I say get back to that. I mean, his first album was actually nothing like that. It was very, very soft, quite gentle in retrospect to a lot of the stuff that he would release later on. But this album definitely feels like a goodbye to his older self before he ventured into new waters in the 1980s. Now, I'm going to release a review a bit later down the line on the next album that Tom Waits did after this one. It was called Swordfish Trombones, but this one, Heartattack and Vine, still nevertheless contains some magnificent material, some really beautiful songs, in fact. The Heartattack and Vine, the title track, I mean, he replaces the word Hollywood for heart attack, so that pretty much kind of sums up where he was at and how he was feeling about where he'd been, the sort of wallowing around in hotel rooms and drinking way into the early hours of the morning and just becoming very, very sort of getting into a bit of a rut. And he pours all that into the title track, I would say. In Shades, the second song, is a sort of lounge jazz instrumental. It's quite good. It's sort of atmospheric, but there's not really much to it, if I'm honest. It's not one of my favourites. Saving All My Love for You, track 3, is a sort of overblown Tom Waits ballad, where he sort of confesses everything and spills it all out onto the side. He sort of expresses that he paid $15 for a prostitute with too much makeup and a broken shoe. So by this point, he'd released a lot of songs that were very like this, and apparently his wife, who was due to marry, of course, Kathleen Brennan, expressed that she absolutely hated this song, because it was very much kind of going over the same old thing. But I actually think it's a nice ballad. I think it's expertly done. He's obviously very used to writing stuff like this. Downtown is a sort of bluesy stomp, all barked out. It sounds like he's totally losing his voice on this song. It's probably quite deliberate, but it's quite engaging. For me, the real jewel in the crown on this album is Jersey Girl. Jersey Girl is a very heartfelt ballad about Kathleen Brennan, and it's almost commercial. This is like a commercial pop song, but because he delivers it in this raspy voice, there's no way it's sort of getting onto mainstream radio. Now, interestingly enough, Bruce Springsteen would actually go on to cover this, who was kind of, I suppose, a lot more accessible to the masses. I don't really like Bruce Springsteen's version of this song. I do like Bruce Springsteen a lot, but I don't actually like the way he delivers Jersey Girl. He seems to sort of miss the point a little bit about what this song is about, but Tom Waits, when he delivers it, it's like unashamed. He's putting in cliches in some instances, left, right, and centre, but he delivers it with such conviction and such abandon, in fact, that it doesn't matter. There's a sort of a glee to the performance of that song. So yeah, that's the real clincher here. Ruby's Arms, the final track on this, is so sort of heartbreaking, and it's beautifully written. It's a kind of a wave goodbye to the music that he'd been making in the 70s, and sort of, the world is kind of opening up to him. He's met this amazing new woman, and he's going to sort of go off in other directions. And of course, at the time, I'm sure he wasn't entirely sure what they were going to be, but it's a definite sort of nod goodbye to the music that he'd been making, and it's all the more tragic for it. It's very sort of there's these beautiful sort of Salvation Army horns in it. He doesn't go for the overblown orchestration that he did on, say, On the Nickel, which is a great song, but it's kind of what we've come to expect of Tom Waits from the sort of late 70s albums like Foreign Affairs and Blue Valentine. But on Ruby's Arms, he kind of strips it back and he just has these beautiful horns on it, and it's very affecting, it's very touching, really, really good stuff. So yeah, this is a great album, particularly if you're already a fan, or if you're sort of collecting his music chronologically. It sort of makes perfect sense. What he would do next, I will explore in another review, and I'll tell you a bit more about the next album, Swordfish Trombones, which is a wildly exciting, radical departure from this, apart from possibly the title track, which is the rawest sort of thing on here. And yeah, I definitely say check it out. It's a great record. Heartattack and Vine by Tom Waits. Now, if you've enjoyed this review, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.